We do. We have apologies from Wayne Thomas, Lee Buntham and Brian Thompson. And just to note that Dominic is currently on another meeting with Welsh Gov and will be attending online as soon as he's finished.
Good, that's great. Thank you very much. Point 2, declarations of interest. I have nothing to declare other than what is already in the record.
We need that.
I don't have any announcements because we've got plenty of substantive work in the business, so I'll move on to point 4. That's the previous minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of April, and I will take matters arising as we go through the pages. So anything on page 1, please. Page 2. We'll be making up 3.1.2. We'll be making further comment to that in the substantive meeting about the service review and going into our reserves. So we'll talk about that later. And page 3. And page 4. And page 5. And congratulations for winning the award at the Finance Wales Award ceremony to Lisa and the team in finance. And just page 6. Okay, so we agree that those minutes are a true record? Yep. Okay, point 5 then, the reports for decision. So the revenue outturn report, we're looking at page 9 of the documents. Lisa, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Lady Wilcox. This is the revenue outturn report for the financial year ending 23-24. So that's the 1st of April 23 to the 31st of March 24. So it presents how we closed the year, and this together with the capital outturn are the initial 2 reports that are a precursor into our closure of accounts process. So structure of our budget reports comments on the difference between the previous information presented to commissioners and the current state of play. This is a little bit different in terms of it gives a holistic view of how we finished the year. And we finished the year, the most important point is with a £214,000 surplus position on the revenue budget. You'll see from Appendix 2 that that is a position that we have turned around during the year. We had forecasted an overspend situation, and we've tried to manage that throughout the year to come to this final position here. So we ended with an overspend on salaries of just under 700,000, underspend of 123 on non-salary related areas, and there's a range of areas there. We had additional income of just under 800,000, and that's what brought us to our final position. Just wanted to draw attention to some of the biggest changes since I last came to you, which was in April, and there's a big turnaround on premises costs. So there's a decrease in the overspend on premises of 753,000, and that's several areas. One of which is the filing, radio and communication costs. That's something that's billed to us centrally. So they did an exercise on operating, you know, the RPI applied to those costs at altered, and we ended up with a £420,000 underspend. Now, that's not a banked credit on the budget at the moment. There's some legal wranglings, and we've disclosed the potential that we may need to pay that 420,000 in the statement of accounts process. It's under contingent liabilities. So at the moment, we know that we could benefit from that credit coming back in, but there is a case into in there. So that's the biggest part of the 753.
Have we got any timelines or resolution of that, or any
No.
progress updates?
No, it's a national issue.
Okay.
And it's something that most of us in the Fire and Rescue Service will find ourselves in a position of.
Okay,
It's
it's not specific to Wales, it's not specific to South Wales.
we just got to wait and see. Yes, and like I said, it's been disclosed in several places in the statement of accounts
Yeah.
in terms of we've had to set up a reserve. So next year it won't come out of the budget. It'll come from a reserve pot specifically set up to pay for that. It's a significant amount of money, 420,000.
Yes.
So we've got to wait and see with that. There's some changes on some minor repair and planned maintenance works that didn't occur towards the end of the year. Always a vulnerable time in the year for us, especially if there's a little bit of debate in terms of the specification of works, and they've just tipped over into the new year, and that came to 209,000.
I have never dealt with a budget where any planned works didn't go over time. Or, slippage is well known throughout the public services.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but it's a reality.
Yes. So this is our revenue portion of that type of work, and they tend to be smaller works, but still, that's made a 209,000 difference. We've got some savings on our adjustment to our final costs on energy of 76,000, and we've got some it was a rephasing of RCT rate payment of 46,000. Those things add up to the 753 change from last time. You can see the biggest portion of that is fire link and the property stuff, the maintenance stuff. The other large area there then was supplies and services, 105,000 increase in the underspend. So this is quite a big area. If you're going to look individually at what makes up that, there's sort of 30 to 40 areas that contribute to that position.
Yeah.
And I've tried to pick up the significant points of that. There's 76 there, increase in IT costs.
Yeah.
You've got an increase of 66 in hydrant repairs. Very difficult to control that because, of course, that Welsh Water deliver on that for us. Now, those two increases are offset underneath by several areas. We take an approach of exception reporting on this. So if there's anything under about £20,000, I wouldn't draw your attention to it.
No.
It's just so the significant elements have been highlighted there.
Yeah.
102,000 there in various equipment underspends, promotional activities 46, uniform costs 34, and you can see the detail of that in paragraph 2.3.4. The other significant area is CapEx. And so that's capital charges on paragraph 2.3.6. And this is a technical difference between last report. So it says it's an increase in spend since the last time I reported to 146,000.
Yeah.
And it's a bit strange, this one. This is related to our joint control work with Mid and West.
Yeah.
We are leading on the spend for a new joint control system. They will contribute 50% of the costs. So what that means is even though we get an income in, we have to pay capital costs through the capital budget. And you will see below there'll be income in then offsetting that. And it's just a technical treatment of those transactions in our books. So there's 186 increase there for what we call CERA, capital expenditure from revenue. And that's the money they pay in us. We're effectively using that for capital to prop up capital expenditure, and then we got a £50,000 reduction then in MRP costs. That's minimum revenue provision costs. It's like a depreciation type charge that is set against the economic use of the assets we employ to deliver our services, if that makes sense. So if we've got something that we have for 10 years and it's £10,000, if we were to take a straight line approach to MRP, we'd write off £1,000 every year then in our books to reflect the economic usage of that asset in much the same way as depreciation is used. MRP is. Yes, MRP is based on borrowing as opposed to the write-off of the asset in its entirety. So if we had grant funding for half of that, we'd only write off the other half.
Yeah, no, I get it.
So MRP is the minimum repayment of borrowing on assets, and that's where our capital budget links with our revenue.
Yeah.
So all financing costs are running through revenue. So you've got three distinct areas there in capital. You've got CERA, you've got MRP, which I just explained, and you've got a little bit extra, 13,000 there for borrowing at the end of the year for interest. And then income, the main piece of that is the 186 I just described, receivable from Mid and West for that
Yes.
control project.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of the report, and just to draw to your attention, we've got that underspend of 214,000, and that was really only achievable because 556 £1,000 that we spent in the year was supported through reserves.
Yeah.
And I've set that out for you in paragraph 3. And you know, the cultural review report was one of those. The controlled rent that's set aside from reserves every year, 100,000. Departmental spends, they ring fenced, and you've got the operational equipment renewal spend there. And those things then are set out in Appendix 3, I think, which presents the reserve position.
Just stop you there, Kirsten.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, yeah, thank you, Lisa, for the report and your team's hard work on putting this together. And just to congratulate you really on, you know, managing the pressures in year, because as you said, at one point in the year, they predicted an overspend. So to get that back, really appreciate the work that was done to get that back. But as you quite rightly say, in the end, we spent more than our budget last year. And it's only because the reserves are there that we were able to keep a roof over our head, so to speak. If I take out the cultural review, because essentially that's what reserves are for, aren't they?
Yeah,
Unexpected one-offs. So that seems to me a very appropriate use of a reserve. And I don't understand the rent review, because you know that is not rent's, in my understanding, unless I've got this wrong, is not a one-off. We should be able to anticipate, and rent should be our core cost for that facility. So I'm not quite sure I understand why then something like rent is coming out of our reserves and is not mainlined into our baseline. And the same thing, I'm not quite sure I understand the departmental spend from carried forward budgets. Could you explain what that is? Because that sounds to me like business as usual.
Yeah.
Business as usual as well. An equipment renewal, I mean, it's a relatively small amount of money, so I'm not, you know, too worried about that. But again, and I suppose things sometimes go wrong that you don't anticipate. But I am concerned that rent, and I'm not sure I understand that other budget line, but why that is an appropriate use of resource. Whereas, as I said, cultural review, one-off, unforeseen, that seems to me a reasonable use of that pot of money.
And something that you wouldn't be returning to.
No,
That's what reserves are there.
No.
Something that, you know.
but concerned that having done the cultural review, there was no line in the budget for implementation of the findings of the review in this year's budget, which then
Well,
back in a position where they're having to look at.
so we're on the back foot already with that. Because,
But the rent, if you could explain why rent is out of reserves and why what the 97 departmental spend carried forward is.
Yes, so I'll start with the lease for outjump control occupation in the police building. That it was an £800,000 lease we entered into 8 years ago. We paid it 8 years ago. So what you were seeing is the amortization of a prepayment coming into the budget. So we paid that, set up a reserve to drip feed that cost then into the budget annually, because you know you're prepaying for 7 years more than you've had something. So there's a matching concept in accounting in terms of you match the income and the expenditure to the year that you've actually had economic benefits. So if you're prepaying something, the cash has gone out to the bank. You know, now
put it in each
but
year.
you've got to phase it across then each year, and that's what you are seeing there. So I set up a reserve, and there's a mechanism on the balance sheet that works to capture that, and so we just drop it in then each year. And this is the final year for that. You will see in Appendix 3 that this is even though we've got a longer term lease with joint control, there was an initial 8-year period, and there's various break points in there as well. Are you okay with
Yeah, I
that?
understand that. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
So at least just for my benefit, that's what we would be referred to as an earmark reserve.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the general reserve.
Yes, yeah. So it's a balance sheet activity, but we sort of drop it into the annual budget. So it's you know, the bottom line is reflective of
Yeah,
all
yeah,
costs for
thank
that
you.
year of running.
Yeah, that explains it.
Yeah, yeah. So you absolutely right though, because you wouldn't normally pay rent from your reserves. So that's a good thought to keep on to. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's absolutely fundamental
It's
that.
very kind of you to try and cover me not being so stupid.
No, it's absolutely fair.
I'm very glad you're asking.
It's very kind of you to say that.
No, it's absolutely, that is exactly what you would expect, how you described that initially. So it's a bit of a strange situation from that point of view, and it is only because we don't own that building. And the funding was tied up with an investor save loan that we had from Welsh Government that was interest free to join up and collaborate in that way a number of years ago. So in terms of the departmental spend, so at the end of the year, I don't like this area, but what can happen with departments, give them some flexibility for the bigger, more significant projects they've got going. If they've started something that's greater in focus than they would normally tackle in their revenue budget, they give them the option of assessing where they are at year end and asking me if they haven't finished that project, what do they need to move their revenue budget forward into the new year to complete in the new year. Now that's something you'd normally do in your capital budget. It's difficult, isn't it, if you've got something that's 6 months in focus and you've put the order in Christmas time thinking it's going to come in the 31st of March and it hasn't because there's, you know, supply chain issues or something, and it comes in the 1st of April, and then effectively that becomes a new year issue.
Yeah.
So I can ring fence, they can make a request to me to ring fence some funds. I would put it on the balance sheet for them, again like an earmarked reserve, and then when the spend comes in the new year, they can match that then against the spend. So what we try not to do is encourage people to say to their suppliers, we haven't had the goods yet, we haven't had the service yet, give me the invoice so I can just get it out of my budget this year. We don't do that. We ask them to come for the cost when we actually get the benefit again. It's a matching concept. Are you okay with departmental budget?
Yeah.
Okay, so equipment renewal reserve, this is a special reserve, and it was set up, and you probably recall this because you were in SNP at the time, but now there's a particular issue with the revenue budget and operational equipment. So depending on the refreshing of operational equipment programs, we could have a greater and lesser need in our revenue budgets in any one financial year. So I think last year we were particularly looking at, it was cutting equipment, there were some big things there. So operational risk management team tend to do the refreshes and technical refreshes of things. The ops budget then tends to pick up and repairs, replacements of lost and broken things, isn't it? So because of this volatility in essentially the ORM budget, we set up this reserve. It's a £2 million reserve sitting on the balance sheet. And what I've asked departments to do is, the first year we did it last year, is if they've got a itemised replacement programme that is, you know, significant in nature, if they could submit it to us and we could spend from the reserves. So what it allowed us to do last year then is put no increase for operational equipment in at all, because I put the money on the balance sheet. So I was able to manage or mitigate the impact to our local authorities by not asking them. It would have cost us something like an additional 600,000. So we avoided putting that on the fire levy last year because we set up the reserve and we were going to deal with it a different way. So what that means then, for every year after the first year, which was last year, I will try and replenish that reserve by putting in 200,000 or 300,000 back in and keeping that topped up. And what that was going to do for our people was, it was going to free them from the constraints of operating in a 1st of April to 31st of March scenario.
A nightmare.
It is a nightmare, and you know, there is such a thing as mad March, and in fact, if you ask me, it's a mad January, February and March.
Yeah. I get that with schools, you know, because I have
Yes.
to spend my departmental budget,
It's a rush to spend.
sometimes on things that I didn't need or
Yeah.
wanted, but otherwise you lose the
Got to
money.
get it in by the end of the year, and that's not productive for us,
It's not,
any of us,
it's-
of local authorities or us.
it's not good use of public
Yeah.
money.
And we don't want our officer, we want them to deliver an operational service. I don't want them to get focused on spending money. That is not the job.
Yeah.
So I just want them to think about
What you need.
absolutely what you need, leave the funding to us. I mean, it's difficult for me to say what the impact on the base budget is going to be year on year, because I almost need to do a trend analysis in terms of what that top up figure is. But our next budget setting will include a figure for that replenishment of that £2 million reserve.
Yeah.
And what I propose to do is, I'm glad you asked the
That's
question.
an earmark
really.
reserve, yeah.
It's the earmarked reserve. It was because I think 18,000 is quite low. I think it's low because that's the first time we did it.
Mm.
And I think they're still developing their plans.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking for quite specific things to come through on the plan.
Mm.
I want identification of exactly what this thing is going to deliver, how many of them, what the cost is. I want them to link in with not just finance, but procurement or managing the contracts. And I think that's why it's quite low. That will be bigger going forward, I envisage, because we have got our operational need, and we do invest in innovation here. I would suggest that in the monitoring reports for budgeting going forward, we enlarge on that piece for commissioners and indeed officers for internal control purposes. And I set up an additional appendix that says, these are how many plans you've got operating out of that equipment replacement reserve, because you're not going to have one. There's going to be any number of equipment pieces there. You could have, you could be focusing on ticks, cutting equipment, hydraulics, whatever it is, and get those definitive pieces set out in greater detail for you to see what we are doing. Because it doesn't just speak of the cost, it speaks of our operational capability as well.
These I take a lot of assurance.
Yeah, absolutely. Great detail. Thank you.
Extra than one of these cameras, right?
Oh,
Oh, I
sorry.
was going to say, ticks. I was thinking of those nasty things that bite you. I thought, oh, they've got a whole jar of those somewhere, you know? No, but things do come and bite you here, but there we are. That's another matter. Lisa, so back to you, please. Thank you.
And that's the end really of the report. And if I can just take us back to the beginning there, it's giving you information for the close of play. What it's asking you to do is to note the content, and that the fact that we are still subject to audit, external audit with Audit Wales.
Yes.
Those figures could change that you've seen there. It's quite unlikely in my experience they could change, but it's not impossible. So until we get the audit done and dusted, we haven't got a final position. And just to note that the final ending position and what the impact is on our reserves, because of course they are the cornerstone now for future financial planning and service delivery.
Okay, is there anything further, please, from anyone on this report? No? Okay, thanks. Okay, in that case then, the commissioners note and agree the report content. So, yeah, in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so back to you again now for the capital outturn report. And we start that on page 23 of our minutes.
So this is, as I said, is part two of the initial approach to closing the financial year and starting the statement of accounts. The revenue budget presents our financial performance for the year, what we spent, what we did, that sort of thing. The capital is a little bit different. It links more with the balance sheet and our long-term assets and what sits there. Because everything we buy through capital tends to move on to our asset register then. And that is, those are the things we use for future service planning. There's not much change between last report and this report for capital. 376,000 difference. So previous reporting forecast £7.2 million outturn. It's actually ended up as £6.8 million. So 376 difference there. And the best way to quantify that is appendix 2 on page 31, and that gives you a breakdown of what makes up that 376,000. And you can see there that most of it is lying in vehicles. And that's again to do with quite long timelines, trying to get appliances in. There's a minimum of a 26-week build, you know, buy and build sort of process. It is not just like buying a normal vehicle. And to support that appendix 2 then, I've written a narrative starting from 2.4 on page 25, which gives a breakdown of what we've spent our money on there. So you can see the top there is new in, there's been a £30,000 increase, Pont Clean, a decrease, and so on and so forth. What that essentially means with capital is we finished the year with 376,000 less. But that doesn't mean those things end there. We've got slippage. What we're asking commissioners to do is just approve the slippage to be slipped forward into the new financial year so we can continue and we complete our capital schemes there. And in terms of financing, because this report is in two parts in terms of what we want to buy, what we did buy, and how we finance that. The impact is literally less borrowing than we would have planned. And that is set out in Appendix 1 on page 29. And if you're fortunate enough to have a in front of you, you can enlarge it, otherwise it's quite small to read, unfortunately. So out of the £6.8 million spent, we can see there's 5.6 borrowing. There's partner contribution, as I mentioned earlier, from for our joint control of 187,000. There's some interest-free funding there of 87,000. We make an annual contribution of 200,000 from the revenue budget. Capital grants are 645, and capital receipts, because when we sell things like our fleet, capital receipts are ring fenced for capital spend only. We won't be using that to support revenue activity in much the same way as you wouldn't borrow to fund revenue activity. There's a further appendix there in terms of what we spent the grant money on, the 645, and that's National Resilience Focus and USAR, and you can see the breakdown there. What I've tried to do, it's a new requirement as part of the two new codes for prudential borrowing and treasury management, is they want us, there's 3 statutory treasury reports that come to commissioners each year. There's a strategy one that needs to come, and I think I presented that to you in March, needs to come to you by the 31st of March before the new financial year starts. So you were here for that one, we did that. And then there's a requirement then to give you an outturn position for the year finished the 31st of March by the 30th of September, if that makes a difference. And then we've got to do a mid-year review for you by the 31st of December. So in terms of statutory requirements, there's 3 points in the year that we have to report to you. But the new codes are asking us to do more regular reporting in terms of a quarterly update. So what I thought I'd do is, at this point in the year, when finance activity is really concentrated and focused on doing the statutory statement of accounts, doing something really brief for you, which I've got on page 35, which literally just concentrates on borrowing, the key bits, borrowing, investing, what our rates are, what the potential could be for interest rates, what the potential could be for CPI. And what I'm trying to tell you with those last 2 pages there is, this is our position. The limits that we set out in our strategy, none of them have been breached either. And Treasury links with capital in that way, you know, in terms of we don't get a settlement for capital. Every bit of capital investment that we make, it's supported massively through borrowing, of which we have to support the financing costs ourselves. And that sits in the revenue budget. So yeah, I'm hoping you can take some confidence in the information that we relay in there, and I just give you a little bit more detail on the loan portfolio and what we've got for us there. And that's it, Chair.
I take great comfort from this one statement. There's no breach of limit set or changes in indicators since the last statement on the 28th of March. So we're on target, we're on time, we're within the guidelines. And that's so important for everything that we do. And thank you for this detail. I'll just open up if there are any questions. No, Chief, no,
Thank you.
nothing. No, Lisa, that's extremely well explained. It's all there out there now in the public record so that anyone can look at it and see that we are being as carefully managed as we can and still allowing opportunities for developments in service provision and into equipment and all the other things that goes into this service to keep people safe. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we note the report and we approve the budget slippage as detailed in Appendix 1. Lisa again. Number 7, Audit Wales inquiries to those charged with governance. There we are. That's a good title. Let's hope we can live up to it.
So this is an ask of both management and those and our governors. So we've gone through this questionnaire or survey as managers. I circulated it a number of weeks ago, and the requirement is for commissioners to consider this formally in a formal meeting.
Yes.
And the questions are posed to us by Audit Wales, our external auditors. And Kate, are you okay just for me to do a quick précis and if you want to come in at the end?
Absolutely, Lisa. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Standard questions are given to us by Audit Wales for assurance purposes, and they focus on 3 areas: fraud, regulation and law, and related parties. So, you know, what are we doing in terms of our systems to prevent and manage fraud, to keep up to date with our regulations and our legislation, and also are we managing our related parties, i.e. conflicts of interest? How are we doing that? Can we demonstrate openness and transparency? And that all that is set out in the main body of the report, and it makes the proper references to the legislation and the audit standards there. So if you move on to the appendix,
Yes,
which is got the Audit Wales at the top. I think that describes you what it's trying to do, and then it sets out our responses in the 3 distinct areas. And I think that is starting on page 43, isn't it?
yes, yeah. 43.
So it's quite clear what it wants us to do. What's really helpful that Audit Wales do for us is it poses the question and then it gives us what last year's response would have been.
Yeah.
So you can just benchmark if something particularly different has occurred, and of course that has happened in a number of instances here. So I've updated our 23-24 response. I'm sure everybody's read it and we don't need to go through it in detail. So the requirement of the request is to...
I would just ask on that second question, with the case of unproven fault.
Yeah.
Where are we at with that? Is there anything we can say in this meeting now that
No,
it's ongoing? No.
I think that's still going through an internal process. So until we've got an outcome there, there's nothing more to be said on that front.
However difficult or distressing that is, you know, it's positive to show that our systems are working. That would be my comment on it.
We've got a number of policies as mentioned there, and we've got a fraud response plan that we activate when we become aware of these things.
Yeah.
And that would involve me initially as head of finance, an investigating officer, and yourself as chair as the finance and audit.
Yeah.
Should it be of a significant and impactful nature.
Yeah.
Kate, would you like to come in at all and add anything?
Thank you, Lisa. Only to say that this is something we do for all of our audits, so there's nothing sort of unique here to South Wales Fire, and just to thank you for the thorough response, Lisa, and just to make everybody aware that this is sort of one strand of evidence for these sorts of activities. This we'll triangulate now with our discussions with Lisa and the team and our wider understanding of the service and the authority. So yeah, thank you. Nothing else unless there are any questions, which I'm happy to chip in on, Lisa.
Thank you for that assurance, Kate. That's very good to hear. Thank you. Okay. Anything further?
That's it. It's all there for you to see.
Yeah.
If I just go straight back up to the end. The requirement of you to confirm your response.
Yeah. Yes, Kirsty.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to Kate. I'm assuming, Kate, that you haven't raised anything else, so you're content with what's being submitted to yourself. Thank you. On relation to forward, when a fraud case is identified and goes through the process, at the end of that process, do we have a learning review to look at whether there is any lessons learned from any cases that arise, so that if necessary, extra safeguards or change in policy and procedure? So is that normal practice after conclusion of the case?
It would be, yes. I think this is the first time that I've been involved in a case that could potentially be fraud. At this point, we don't know whether it is. So this is the first time, and I think
it is policy to do a lessons learned review at the end of any.
It's not stipulated in terms explicitly like that you've got to do a lessons learned, but it's definitely something that we would do as a pragmatic final step, I would suggest.
I just wonder whether you just formalise that. I know that we have
response plan,
but just that there's formally written down that at the end of an investigation of that kind, there is just a review just to see whether there are any lessons that could have been learned, any systems that could have been tightened up. I just wonder if we just document that as a formal part.
Is he keeping with any area of learning?
Yeah.
Would he brief it afterwards?
Yeah.
Forward?
Yeah, I'm sure it does would happen, but just, quantifying that, setting up that expectation, demonstrates that we're a learning organisation, and that, we look
And
at,
then we've got an audit trail.
Yeah.
For audit wins.
just that we, learn, and there's a formal review to see whether anything could be tightened up or changed.
Yeah.
But thank you very much.
I do an annual look at the fraud response plan, and I could bring it back to a future finance
And then we
audit
could,
committee.
with its amendments, we can then approve the.
Yes,
Yeah.
so you can see exactly what I'm referring to. It is on our intranet site, but it is something very few people, other than if you were involved in the thick of something, you would use.
Yeah. Thank you. It's great there. I'm happy for this to be our response. Very happy.
Yeah, good. In that case, we confirm the response to audit wins inquiries. And again, I echo Kirsty's thanks to Lisa and the team, because this is an incredible amount of work on top of the normal work that goes on. So thank you very much. So that completes the reports for decisions at this point. We will be coming back to a report for decision at the end. So we now move on to reports for information. So back to Audit Wales, the annual audit plan 2024. So Lisa, you're going to begin this before Kate and Caroline, I think.
Yeah, so this is a standard output from Audit Wales that they provide us with each year, and it focuses on the performance aspect of our work under the local measure, and also the statutory financial audit services that we get from our Audit Wales colleagues. There's no covering report to this. It sets out various bits. Let me just scroll down in terms of their approach. Actually, there's interesting bit. It is, if you're an accountant, there are interesting bits in terms of the concept of materiality, because the auditors cannot check every single transaction, so they apply these concepts of materiality and the impact that the omission or the error will have on the reader of the accounts. As we know, the statement of accounts is our key communication tool in terms of demonstrating our stewardship to our stakeholders. And I'll hand over to Kate, if you've got anything to add, Kate.
Thank you, Lisa. Afternoon, everybody. I'm Kate Howard. I'm the Audit Director on the financial audit, or the account side, and Carwyn today is with me, who is the performance audit manager. So we've come sort of together so we can cover all aspects of the plan. And as Lisa has sort of set out, this is our document that sets out how we will discharge the Auditor General's statutory responsibility. So apologies if we just jump around the document a little bit. I'll touch on the financial audit to the account side, and then I'll pass to Karen, if I may, to pick up the performance audit and the measure side. And just to confirm for the commissioners, the report is now final. I will just touch on one amendment further along. So whilst you've got drafts, the watermarks and so on, the report hasn't changed in its final version, apart from one date, which is the date of the appointment of commissioners. So as Lisa has alluded to, for financial statements, we can't look at everything. We only provide reasonable assurance. So that's where materiality levels kick in. And on page, bear with me, page 78 of your pack, we've just given you the materiality and where we get those materiality figures from. So for most of the statement of accounts, which I know is on the agenda today, we will focus our work at that sort of level. And the firefighters pension fund being lower in value and a standalone statement has a lower materiality. Generally, like all other bodies, your materiality will be based on the value of your income. So higher income generally results in higher materiality. However, we do lower materiality for certain parts of the accounts, and you can see that at the bottom of page 78 there. Senior officer remuneration is a standard area where we would lower materiality, as generally is related party transactions. For those disclosures relating to individual members, though, there'll be disclosures around relationships with Welsh Government and your constituent authorities and so on. We're not talking those disclosures there. We're talking about anything that is either coming through from the commissioners or from senior officers as individual issues. And at the moment for you, we've also got commissioners' allowances with a lower level of materiality. These things are generally those things that people look for in the accounts. So that's why they are sort of slightly lower, well, very much lower in this for these things. And I'm just then going to touch on page 80, which picks up the risks. We've got a flag with those charged with governance, the risks, the accounts. So management override is a standard risk for all audits. That is the risk that wherever controls bodies put in place, management override them. That doesn't say that there are, we know that there are overrides in this authority. We're not saying that at all. This is just about a standard risk where we've got to do enough testing to satisfy ourselves across all audits so that's not happened. And then page 81 picks up, again, relatively standard risks for local government bodies around the valuation of pension funds and the valuation of assets. A lot of audit work goes into those, as you can see from the work we will do. Just for the commissioners to be aware, the audit is well advanced, so we're working through these issues sort of as we speak. And then it would be remiss of us not to just include something around the impact of the culture review and appointment of commissioners. This, with the exception of the governance statement and your commissioner allowances, we don't think is going to have a significant impact on the financial statements, where we are just working through that and making sure we can justify that statement. But at the minute, we're looking at those two areas for the impact of the appointment of yourselves. And then another standard local government or audit body risk, public sector audit body risk, is senior officer remuneration. Even where there's not a huge amount of movement in senior officers, again, because of the public interests, we just consider that to be a risk. We've got page 84 for the financial audit statements timetable. The statutory deadline is November, but we are on track to deliver our work to the September meeting of this committee. So we will be ahead of the statutory deadline for yourselves, all being well, as we finalise the work. I'll just then finally touch on the fee on page 87. Audit fees have gone up across the board. We have had an inflationary increase, and our fee scheme is approved by the Senate Finance Committee, so that's not unusual or unique to South Wales Fire. We are legislatively not able to make a profit, so if we do deliver any audit work for less than our estimate, that will come back to you as a refund. At the minute, certainly from the financial audit side, we're on track, but I will keep in touch with Lisa around where we go on that. So I don't know if commissioners want to ask any questions on the financial audit side, or if they'd rather I pass to Carwyn to cover off the performance audit side and we can pick up any questions at the end.
We'll continue to Karen, please, and then we can, if we have anything, we'll ask then. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Chair. Yeah,
So the biggest piece of work we'll be undertaking at South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority next year will be a project around how the council set their wellbeing objectives. The Auditor General has got two main duties for the authority. One is to have assurance that there are proper arrangements in place to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness, which both the accounts work and the performance audit work contributes towards. The other one then is in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act around embedding the Sustainable Development Principle. As part of the Wellbeing of as the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, there is a requirement on us to undertake a piece of work about have bodies embedded the Sustainable Development Principle when setting their wellbeing objectives once every Senedd cycle. And then on the back of doing that at all 48 bodies, we then produce a national summary of that as part of the Act. This is the last year available for us to do that, so that's why we'll need to undertake this work at the South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority, well, hopefully before Christmas. There is one piece of work outstanding from last year on the performance audit front. That was due to staff sickness who ultimately left the organisation. We've now reappointed, and we'll be looking to pick up both pieces of work by about the autumn or report by Christmas. Then is the timetable for those. And then the last piece of work, which is a much smaller piece of work then, the Local Government Measure Act was repealed for all local authorities in the 2021 Local Government and Elections Act. However, the duties remain in place on ourselves and fire and rescue authorities. So we just need to confirm that there are improvement plans in place and performance reports have been put together in line with the Act. So yeah, that's a much lighter piece of work that we'll be undertaking too. So again, I'll pause there and happy to take any questions.
I don't have anything, but I can see on my right, Kirsty does, so please.
Thank you, Karen. Please forgive me, and I should know this, so I'm so sorry. So page 85, it talks about the wellbeing work and the local government measure 2009 work. You said there was an outstanding piece of work that hadn't been completed. What do you remind?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was on last year's audit plan, and it's around the theme of prevention. Again, that piece of work will be undertaken at all three fire and rescue authorities. I think it's one of the on the national frameworks, one of the priorities there, which is what we've based our audit plan on previously, which is why it's almost left late in the 5-year cycle for us to do the set and wellbeing objectives while we make our way through those priorities. So yeah, the other piece of work is around the prevention work that the fire authorities do.
Thank you. Well, Karen, as you can imagine, you know, with the whole thrust of everything that we're doing here, I mean, that is obviously an important part of it, but I know that colleagues in Audit Wales will understand the transformational stuff that's going on in every aspect of the service. So, you know, we would hope that we would be able to do what you require, but, you know, bear with us. It's been a difficult 7 months, and we've moved mountains, and, you know, staff have, you know, I have to pay tribute to the staff, the changes that have been made in such a short time, you know, and again, I pay tribute to the interim chief who has led from the front with that. So we will do all that we can to ensure that Audit Wales is satisfied. However, I'm not asking for special circumstances, but I'm just noting the immense work that's gone on.
But it completely understandable. And yeah, we'll always look to work with authorities when setting up timings for field work and making sure there's availability and all those kinds of things, because we're here to help improve ultimately and give that assurance, and not to detract from any of the work that's ongoing.
Of course.
And on that note, Chair, can I just put on record my thanks to Lisa and team. As I said, the audit of the accounts is well advanced, for the support and the cooperation that we've received in what I know is a difficult time. So just thanks from us.
Thank you, Kate. That's warmly welcomed and recorded. Diolch yn fawr. Is there anything further on this point? Because it's reports for information. No? Okay, let's move on to point 10, then draft statements of accounts. Page 25, Lisa, thank you.
So the team obligated to draft a statement of accounts by the 31st of May, and that requires certification from the treasurer, easy for me to say, which I signed off the 31st of May before going into the external audit process and getting official sign off by myself, the chief, the chair, which Kate alluded to will be hopefully everything going well the end of September. So I thought we don't have to bring the statement of accounts to committee. There is a finance committee, and I just thought in terms of sort of paving the way for that information coming through, and all the other information that will come through from audit in terms of you're gonna have to sign it off in the finished form. You'll have a letter of representation, you'll have an audit report. It's good now just to sort of familiarise ourselves with the format and the, you know, the information that's contained within the draft statement of accounts. And it is a large piece of work, which is, I'm glad we don't print it off. It's 82 pages. And what this basically does for us, it gives us an annual retrospective on our financial performance and position. It does this primarily through a narrative report and the main financial statements, which are the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, which links quite clearly with our revenue budget, movement in reserve statement, which shows how we are funding our activities from reserves sitting on our balance sheet. The balance sheet itself, which will give information on the value of our long-term fixed assets, you know, current assets and liabilities that fall underneath the 12-month period, and then long-term assets. And essentially, the bottom half of the balance sheet is about how we are funded in terms of our reserves, you know, how that position is funded. Cash flow will point towards our longevity and how we are using cash in terms of using our fire levy to run ourselves with, and using our borrowing and you know, capital receipts to invest, which is how we should be, because they can point to all sorts of issues. So those are the main financial statements that the reason why the statement of accounts is put together. And then what it does is it gives you a raft of notes then to the accounts to try and explain what each statement is trying to do and the pieces of information in each statement. And it culminates then in the firefighters pension fund, which is integral for this organisation. So there's a lot of information there, and it just tries to explain to the readers exactly how the organisation is functioning from a financial point of view. But it does actually give much more than that. It's just very long and quite technical.
It's extremely detailed. You haven't left any stone unturned. I'm very glad that you follow the SIPFA code of practice, because I'm supposed to understand that as a former council leader, allegedly. I do try to understand it, but the level of detail here is exemplary. If anybody was looking for anything, they can find it. It is entirely transparent, and thank you again and your team for producing such a comprehensive document that if anyone has an answer or a question, then it can be pointed here. I am content, and I'm sure, you know, my fellow commissioners are, that this work is being completed in an exemplary fashion, and that we have the backup whenever we need to discuss the draft statement of accounts. So, unless we've got any questions on it, I'm happy to move this report for information. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're on audit, but we move to a different expert. We've now got Steen Hawley. Lisa, is there anything you need to do to introduce Steen? He's been with us at previous meetings.
Yeah, thank you, Lady Wilcox. Welcome, Steen. Just gonna scroll down to the next bit.
Page 211.
Perfect.
Well, that just shows how much those draft statements and accounts have taken up.
The work the team have done.
Mhm.
The internal audit is presenting two completed audits since we previously come. I can just get there. And that is the electric vehicle charging and sustainability audits that were left over from the audit period of 23-24. So Steen, thank you for joining us. Steen will run you through the audit reports and what they mean.
Thank you, Lisa. Steen, over to you, please.
Thank you, Lady Wilcox. Yeah, as Lisa said, these are kind of two pieces of work outstanding from previous years. I guess just to give you a little bit of background, there's probably we don't often give limited assurance, and we don't always make as many recommendations as we have in these two reports. But the context of that, I think, is usually we're asked to come in at a point where there's an established system, a process in place, and we're looking to provide assurance, or there's already an issue and we're looking to kind of make improvements. I think for both of these, they're both relatively new. In particular, the electric vehicle charging. The reason we were asked to undertake the audit was to inform the processes going forward. It was the charging facilities had just been implemented, and there was already a recognition that they needed policy was required, and all of the kind of processes that need to be aligned with that would need to be put in place. And the aim then in that context was for us to kind of make recommendations to inform of that process. So that's probably the context in terms of certainly the limited assurance for the electric vehicles, but also for the sustainability one as well. Across our client base, all of our clients have had sustainability on their audit plans for a long time, but not all organisations have felt comfortable that they've got the processes in place for us to do an audit, so they've been kind of putting those back. So I think we probably said this when we presented the plans, credit to the service that they've asked us to undertake that, and again the recommendations in the report are aimed at improving and then developing those processes as you go forward from a good place already. And again, we would have picked up in the report itself that there's a sustainability officer. And again, there's not all of the organisations we work for, including the larger ones, have a sustainability officer. It tends to fall within the kind of the remit of maybe health and safety, maybe estates. So it's a good thing that the service have a sustainability officer that kind of leads on all of this, acknowledging that you'll have seen in the report there have been some issues in terms of resilience in that role. So I won't go through the reports in detail, but I will take any questions if there are any.
Yes, thank you, Steen. I'm glad to hear that we do have that sustainability person. And good to note that even large organisations don't have that. So do we have any questions or comments for Steen, please? Kirsty?
Well, not so much for Steen really, but obviously, the audits are not what we would want them to be. So the question is there's the so what from the what next now, isn't it? So I don't have any question for Steen in terms of content of the report, but the findings are stark. And when we think about what Karen was just saying about future generations and our legal responsibilities, as well as change policies, etc. It's a civic organisation. We should be at the forefront of exempling, demonstrating good practice. So for me, it's like, what do we do next? Happens now.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think that because of the level of change and upset that the organisation has been going through over the last couple of months, it's been a little bit of more relation in terms of focus.
Sure. Yes.
And as a result, we're now in a position where we can begin to give it the necessary headspace to take it to the next level. I've already spoken to Lisa about opportunities for enhancing skill sets in relation to our action planning and taking learning from other organisations that are further down the line than we are in this space. to put you in a much better position in relatively quick time. So part of that is around some collaboration, shared service arrangements within the service in Wales. So hopefully we'll be in a position with strategy and some strategies that see us in a position where we're working towards carbon neutrality by 2030 and responding to the requirements of the environmental portfolio going forward.
And I would say this, wouldn't I? But surely, our local council partners will have been, further down the road in this and can perhaps, assist us in that area.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of the activity is very specialist, and I think services have some services have done really well at recruiting those people with that expertise, and it's about identifying where those opportunities are to share services, so that we can take it. There may be local authorities having that experience also, but I do know that those experience or that level of experience is available in other fire and rescue services in Wales.
Good.
So we'll be able to collaborate in that space, hopefully, and take us to the next level where we have a very clear strategy around how we're going to do what we need to do. Now ultimately, I think it would be very aspirational to suggest that we'll be carbon neutral by 2030, but we can certainly be an awful lot closer than where we are today.
Yeah. There we are, Kirsty. We've got a plan.
So can I ask, so who does this sit under?
At the moment, Lisa looks at the environmental issues as part of the portfolio.
And then the report identifies single point of failure, lack of resilience because of sick leave. So how are we fixed in that regard now going forward?
I think that the post sits under property. So as Dean just alluded to, it can sit in a number of places. It's a standalone post and often is if it is there at all. Because most of our inroads are going to be focused on our property alterations going forward. That's what, decarbonising our estate, and this focuses on fleet, doesn't it? So this is what we're doing in terms of modernising our fleet to become less reliant on fossil fuels. I think that without it costing any money, it's very difficult to build resilience. But the Chief and I have been speaking about how we can achieve that through a shared resource, potentially on a cross-organisational basis, which I think is really feasible, isn't it? Because it's a really difficult area to build resilience around, and also to put any career progression in place to retain staff once you've got it. And this is very much, it's a bit like information governance was and procurement was 20 years ago. It's a new area. It's a booming area, and it's a very difficult employee market to compete in. So even if you secure somebody, chances of holding on to them are very difficult.
So in a previous position, I held the strategic responsibility for environmental change and worked with both the fire authority and the expert within our organisation to develop those environmental strategies and then subservient strategies that sort of bring all of that to life in terms of, in this space, around vehicles. I know that Mid and West and North Wales have done pilot activity around diesel from the fleet. So all of our fire appliances are operating on diesel, fossil fuel, which won't be available in the longer term. But ultimately, there is cost neutral elements of how to achieve remove diesel from the fleet, and they've been piloted and tested. There's no need for us to necessarily reinvent the wheel in that space.
No,
we can take the learning and HVO is the fuel alternative, which is hydrogenated vegetable oil that can go into fire engines without any alterations to the vehicle. Same fleet, no different vehicles.
Wow.
And the difference between short life cycle carbonation. My questions to the expert from my naive position was, I'm just burning carbon through vegetable oil instead of fossil fuels. The difference is that hydrogenated vegetable oil is short life cycle, so it's stuff that's going above the earth, burning into the atmosphere anyway, wherever we big things from underground, and they're adding to the carbon footprint. So it's those kinds of expertise that educate us all and bring us along to where we need to get to as a sector.
And now you alluded to information governance in 20, I remember that position 20 years ago. They were like, rarer than hen's teeth. So now I get it.
It is a booming area where there's a lot of change there. I think for commissioners' awareness, we have got a carbon reduction plan and we do report that annually. Last time it came, it was September 2023. So there'll be an update either in our sustainability officer who's been unwell has returned to us. So giving us some time to sort of just phase back in. It could be September, it could be one of the autumn months, so we provide you with an update on where we are with that plan. And then try and make inroads with the initiatives that the chief has alluded to.
So Steve, in that discussion, hopefully you will have heard that, you know, we do have a roadmap to get us out of this position.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Lady Wilcox. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing further then, and we've recognised a lot of positive, we've also recognised negative today. So let's move on to our performance report, point 12. And Dean, I think we can give Lisa a rest for a minute, can't we?
Thank you, Lady Wilcox. It will give Lisa a drink of water. So this is the report for strategic performance indicators. It's a follow-up report because I previously presented to the commissioners.
Yes, you did.
In and around the 7 strategic performance indicators for the service, which obviously we need to publish and report to various stakeholders. When I previously reported to yourselves, that was a 9-month window of data across those strategic indicators with a predicted outcome for Q4 of the last financial year.
Yeah.
So this is a follow-up report now, because obviously we've had and received the Q4 data. That's allowed us to validate and quality assure the information and then be able to present to you the final totals against those 7 performance indicators for 23 and 24. So I'll just basically give you a summary and the key highlights really in terms of those 7 indicators. So the first 4 are incident-based indicators, and I guess page 256 might give you the best indication of what they are. So the first 4 there are incident-based indicators. Then we've got 2 fatality and injury indicators, and then the last one around dwelling fires. The final room of origin is what's classed as an effective response indicator.
Yeah.
So in terms of those totals, I think it's pleasing to note that the total fires attended has decreased by 10%. The highlight within this one would be around deliberate fires. So the deliberate fires for the previous year are significantly reduced, which is a good indicator of the performance that our stations are doing out there on our behalf. So aligned to their community risk management plans, the activity, the prevention activities that they are undertaking has given us a reduction there in around the deliberate fire settings. The total fire alarms attended has increased by 8%. I know we went into detail on this at the last one. That's obviously aligned now to the Audit Wales plan and the automatic fire alarm project that will kick in next year. The total RDCs attended has gone up by 3. And again, we'll analyse and explore this in around the 30 to 20 miles per hour. So we try to collect some data and give us a bit of understanding of where we might need to focus more attention this year, particularly around the educational aspects.
But to be fair, you know, there has been a bit of to and froing on this, hasn't there, in the political arena in terms of the 20 miles per hour. So it can't be easy for you to get the data collection when things are a movable feast.
Yeah, so we did do a piece of analysis in sort of short time because the data set isn't large enough at the moment.
No.
And the impact in terms of incidence of severity around 20 to 30, that data isn't there. Ultimately, majority of incidents that require intervention fire and rescue service where you need to take action to rescue casualties occur at speeds on roads that are higher than 30 miles an hour. On the faster roads.
Yes.
So therefore the impact from a 30 to 20 perspective is more of attendance operational incidents from an all firefighter perspective.
Okay.
And traffic build up, not necessarily from an RTC perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. That's it, you know, it's a difficult one to try and explain to the public, and you know, I do commend you in trying to make some sense of these figures.
Thank you, Chief. So the next one down there is total other special service calls attended. And just for clarity, it's other special service calls will cover things like flooding,
Okay.
assisting other agencies, bariatric rescue assistance, and a few other classifications as well. I think to note within this indicator, because it has increased by 4%, we've seen an increase in assisting other agencies. That's particularly around the Welsh Ambulance Service Trust.
Yeah.
So the Chief's in contact with his colleagues through WAST, just to give some extra understanding as to provide them with some data in and around the calls that we're receiving from Welsh Ambulance Service control room and the things that we are now attending. So we're trying to gather that information so we can share it with WAST, get a better understanding, to try and help reduce or mitigate some of the calls that we might be going to.
Are they asking you to do different things or extra things, or, you know, what's the...
It's a broad range,
Coverage.
Lady Wilcox, yeah. So we'll be in around assisting in medical calls where we can. A lot of the time it's in around just providing people power to remove people from premises to help them into ambulances. So we're doing a fair share of that as well.
But so there's a range of activities that we say, some of which you know, are in the context or conversation around role.
Yeah.
Others are already agreed, and we have protocols in place with Welsh Ambulance Service to assist with bariatric rescue when it's a life-threatening
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
So anecdotally, feedback suggests that sometimes that might not always be the case, and we may be experiencing attendance or other incidents. So as Dean alluded to, commission work to be pulled together so that when I next meet with Chief Executive of Welsh Ambulance Service, which actually is next week, I'll be able to take you through those areas so that we can understand. You know, anecdotally, we can talk about an increase in slippage within the protocol, but ultimately, times, days, and places makes that complex.
Yes.
So that's the report that Dean alluded to. I'll take.
Interesting. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. So the next two indicators are around total deaths and injuries from all fires and then accidental fires. Obviously, we've seen a decrease in that, which is really pleasing.
Yes,
in terms of those figures. And I think that plays a little bit of credit again to the effect and prevention that our crews are doing on our behalf each and every single day.
Good. Good.
The last indicator there is dwelling fires confined to the room of origin, and this is inherently linked to the thematic review for operational training.
Okay.
This is around the tactics that we employ at incidents, and there's a lot of work going on with the Chiefs back in terms of the thematic review and the prevention and educational elements. But it's pleasing to note that obviously we've seen an increase, and this is the only indicator where an increase is positive. So if we can find the fire to a room of origin, the higher that figure, the safer it is for our communities out there. It shows that our response is being effective, that we tactically are dealing with the fires in the correct manner. So this is a good indicator for us, and hopefully with a bit of work around the thematic review and compartment fire training in particular, we aim to increase that figure as well.
That's a really important point that Dean, isn't it? You know, this training about, I mean, you know, forgive me for my amateur status, but it's about knowing what to do when you get there, isn't it? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, quite right. Yeah. So I think that where we've got ourselves to as a sector, and this is no criticism of South Wales, this is a sector thing. We went through a process of applying training methods that were almost sheet dev.
Yeah.
And staff across the country would utilise a automatic pilot when they pulled up at an incident and deploy certain tactics because that's what they've been trained to do in a very sort of, rather than have it training people in a variety of different tactics to give them lots of tools in their toolbox to be able to pick the appropriate tool when they get there by utilising their situational awareness and understanding what tools are appropriate. And this is what the thematic review alluded to in terms of people going and using lower flow rates in terms of hose, small diameter hose, rather than putting larger quantities of water on operational incidents. We've sort of started to look at that, and staff now are being trained to utilise additional methods and utilise the most appropriate method for the incident and we're starting to see clearly the benefits of that in the results. Now that work will be further enhanced by the fact that the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor is back in service next week, undertaking an additional thematic, where we've been looking at all of these tactics going forward to see what's being taught and whether we can further enhance what we're delivering on our training forces.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, Kirsty, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think, you know, what's really important is to look at the trend over a period of years. So like rather than just a simple one-off year, so we're closer to hitting our target on percentage of dwelling fires confined to of origin than we've been for a number of years. So that's really positive.
Yeah.
Because the performance wasn't great, you know, in the previous couple of years. So, but the reality is we're still not on target, are we? So although there is an improvement, and that's really welcome, this organisation has not hit its target in all the data that is here, and that goes back to 2018. So there's clearly still more to go at.
Yeah.
And that'll be really, really good. But that's, you know, but if there's an improvement of where we've been for the last couple of years, that's very welcome. And can I ask about deliberate road vehicle fires? So those are at theme, and there is a specific emphasis on Cardiff and a specific emphasis on the community of Ely. Is that related to the specific incidents?
Oh yes, the unrest.
in Ely? And I just want to say, I'm just really impressed by the proactive work that this service has done with regards to young people in Ely. So there wasn't a fire cadet programme in Ely. Those incidents happened in Ely, and people have come forward to create a fire cadet programme in that community. I had the pleasure of meeting those youngsters on Sunday, and the two men that are leading that cadet group who have proactively seen a community that needs support and help and have stepped up and have said, fires, you know, South Wales Fire and Rescue have got a part to play in providing opportunities in that community that hopefully will see a reduction in those kinds of figures. And I just want to put on record how impressive those cadet trainers are, and their commitment to proactively trying to address those figures is really, really good. And we've been a hard time for the service, and we don't talk about all the things that have gone wrong, but that's something that we should be shouting from the rooftops that has gone right.
It's a great example, Kirsty.
They were brilliant.
Yeah, I completely concur with everything that you just said, and I think that it's the cadets is one of the things that the station has been proactive in. It's many others as well, and I came to fruition at the recent open day on Ely Fire Station, where the community attended and had a really wonderful time. Now I attended towards the end of that open day and saw the aftermath, because I was at another event in Cardiff Central. But the feedback from the people who'd attended, the families, local communities, the children, and photos that we sort of put out in our media that followed that all needs to be shouted from the rooftops. So I completely concur.
No, I totally agree. Thank you, Kirsty. And I think just to clarify the point, yes, so the deliberate vehicle fires at the Ely van increase was due to the incident. Yeah, I think we've seen an increase around the Cardiff area generically, and that's been dealt with through various partnerships. But majority of that has been linked to organised crime. So we obviously deal through these contacts and partnerships to try and help reduce and mitigate those impacts as well.
Yes, it's reflective, isn't it, of the issues of society that services such as ours have to pick up the pieces, for want of a better phrase.
I think historically, deliberate fire setting in vehicles often as a result of vehicles being stolen and a means to conceal evidence by doing the vehicle. That's not as prevalent these days, as vehicles are more difficult to steal. It tends to be set fire in situ these days, or as part of a targeted attack against an individual. It can often spread to property and so on. So it's a slightly different modus operandi, but we utilise our arson reduction team to get out and be proactive in those areas where we've had problems.
Thank you. Dean, is there anything further you'd like to add for us?
Nothing else, Chair, other than the only recommendation was for the commissioners to note the report and then approve publication of this information so it'll go onto the services internet site.
Yeah, well, we certainly approve that. But what it has engendered is a very interesting discussion about, you know, the wider work, the community work, and the essential work done by South Wales Fire and other fire and rescue services. So thank you very much for that. And we do know there's areas for improvement, but we're on it and we will continue to try our best to make those improvements and hit those targets. So diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you. Okay, so item 13, forward work programme from Chief, please, for this committee.
Thank you, Lynn Wilcoxon. And
Do we need to just finish the one report off for a decision, or do you want to come back to it?
Yeah, I was going to do that next, but
Okay, that's fine.
But
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, ultimately, I wasn't intending to say a great deal about the forward work plan anyway, other than to say that clearly the report that begins on page 261, which brings together some of the things that historically began in April, and obviously we're now in July.
yes,
There is a degree of slippage with certain activities and areas because of the fact that we've been on the sort of the change and so on that I talked about earlier. I think that where we are though is anything that's statutorily required to have been brought to you has been brought to you, so on time. So we're in the right space in that regard. I think that when we had our people committee yesterday, we talked about the requirement for a review and refinement based on the fact that all of the activities that are going on as part of the forward work plan internally will have a knock-on for consideration for what needs to come to future committees. And so therefore this will be revised prior to the next meeting. And a couple of areas which are sort of slipped from this occasion, so things like departmental risk register that hasn't been talked about today will be picked up in the next meeting, and at that next meeting we'll have a revised forward work plan that takes account of everything that we're doing internally that then needs to be chunked up to this meeting. So as I say, what I'm trying to get across is the reassurance that anything from a statutory perspective has been brought to you on time.
Yes.
So if there is a little bit of slippage in it elsewhere, they will be picked up as part of a revised forward work plan at the next meeting.
Yes, thank you, Chief. And you know, it's important to note that some of the lead directors, contact officers here are on long-term sick. So, you know, this work is being picked up by other people as well. So in that case, it's remarkable how little slippage there has been. Because, you know, we're working under staffing there, and thanks to people who have stepped in to that. So I'll go back now to a report for decision, and that's appointment for head of communications. It's on page 59 of your documents, and I'll bring in Dominic Meeker, please, to introduce the report. Dominic, good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. So this report is for approval of the immediate recruitment of a permanent head of communication and engagement. Within the report, it also provides a initial job description and a outline of the organisational structure. So the service has prioritised some key areas in our transformation and improvement plan. Two of those are leadership, the other of which is, well, one's leadership, one's communication and engagement, and the other is around positivity internally and externally. This role will be key to delivering all three of those areas. It'll improve our internal and external communications, develop a communications and engagement strategy that helps us move things forward, communicate better with our staff, and project the positive things that we do as a service, both internally and externally, to our communities. The post will be permanent. It will be at the head of service level, which will mean that it sits on our SLT and is able to take a strategic view of communications straight into that department without it having to go through a number of levels. It will provide additional support and challenge for the commissioners, the chief fire officer, an SLT in terms of our communication plans and how we develop those. And it will also support us in developing some of our key communication processes and systems, such as improved intranet and external social media. It will be on an ongoing cost of around £89,000. The job description within the report outlines the areas that we would like it to focus on, some of those that I've already covered. It will also support the review of our 24-hour provision in terms of communication and engagement. The next stage of that job description is with people services to put into the official template. There might be some minor word changes within that, so the words such as develop and might change to lead or give it a bit more of a strategic influence, but on the whole the job description is outlined there and the person specification as well. So this is for the approval, and I'll open it back up to yourselves.
Thank you, Dominic, for that detail. Have I got any comments or questions from anyone, please? Kirsty.
Thank you, Dominic. So you just touched on it there with your final comments, Dominic, about item 3 on the duties and responsibilities, about developing an on-call arrangement. Could you just outline what exactly do we mean by that? And you said that there may be some word changes to that, which could fundamentally change, I suspect, what that means.
No, sorry, so I haven't been very clear there. So the structure of that job description will remain when it goes into the template for publishing. People services will review it again, so there might be a couple of minor word changes within it. So we might change develop to lead, or we might change lead to strategic, just to ensure that it is at the correct level and it's in the correct template that they move it over to. It won't change the context of that job description or what we mean in any of those in any real way. It's more of a formatting piece. In terms of the on-call arrangement, fire and rescue services would normally have a 24-hour on-call arrangement to support communication. So we do have operational staff that are trained in communication and engagement, so they can manage some of that. We don't have the ability to call on communication expertise directly from that team 24/7. So the communications team does do a lot of stuff on the weekends and some stuff out of hours. It's more kind of goodwill process. So they will be in charge of reviewing our provision and seeing whether we need to improve it and how we need to improve it. Any review would of course need to go through a full consultation process for improvement and be budgeted on and considered, but we've put it in the job description as that might be a piece of work that we would like them to look at.
Because of course the nature of the service is that it's 24 hours, isn't it? Yeah.
And then also, can I just wonder about the word marketing in paragraph 10. And really, there's a different skill set, isn't there? So a comms person isn't necessarily a marketing and a recruitment person. So I'm just wondering, I'm just wondering about that mixture of different skills that we're looking to recruit, and whether we've got that accurately reflected in the duties and responsibilities.
Yeah, so
they are different things, aren't they? A comms expert is a difference to a recruitment and marketing.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes, but often very closely aligned. So I think the elements that we're trying to articulate here would be the communications elements of marketing. So working in collaboration with other departments that would be leading on recruitment, being able to sell that recruitment campaign in the best possible way to get into and to attract the most diverse candidates, to be able to market or target through social media, direct marketing, or utilising the appropriate media for attracting. It's the communications elements of recruitment and selection that we're trying to articulate there, I would suggest.
To bring those skills of comms into what's created,
And just to add to that, we ran the job description through our comms advisor that has advised on some of that wording, and we've put some specific note within the job description to leave some of that open to ensure that we get the right candidate. So they don't necessarily need to be an expert in comms and marketing, but they need to have an awareness of those areas like the Chief Fire Officer has outlined to be able to do that job in a more holistic approach.
okay. Well, in that case, if there's nothing further, that the recommendation is the commissioners approve the immediate recruitment of a permanent head of communications and engagement, and that the commissioners note the associated job description, to which I would add, and any amendments as deemed necessary by the template. Yeah, so that covers it. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dominic.
Thank you.
It was a yes. It was a yes. It was a long way of saying yes. So finally, to consider any items of business that I deem urgent in part 1 or part 2 of the meeting. I have nothing. Is there anything that anyone else is bringing, please? No? In that case, diolch yn fawr iawn am dod. Thank you all for coming. And I declare the meeting closed. And thank you to our guests from Audit Wales and TIAA. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Diolch, Hwyl.